Joe Biden would set America on a path
of socialism and decline.
So in today's video, we are going to be talking about if this man, Bernie Sanders, is a socialist, a democratic socialist, or not. Because conservatives in American politics love throwing this word socialism everywhere.
President Biden and Speaker Pelosi's radical socialist agenda.
Joe Biden's policy and socialist agenda will only serve to destroy America.
Vote for Joe Biden.
Yeah, and I think of this rule the same way that I even think of the electric vehicle push, in that it's a direct attempt to inject socialism into the economy.
My opponent stands with socialists and communists. He wants to give everything away to Cuba.
To give a speech about his $3.5 trillion Build Back Better socialist spending.
Fighting tooth and nail to protect the middle-class homebuyers from Joe Biden's new socialist tax.
So I do have to say one thing is that if Joe Biden is a socialist, he's a pretty shitty socialist. I mean, he hasn't done anything like gotten rid of Wall Street or anything like that, the things that would be the tenets of socialist thought and idea. I mean, hell, he could have even done something like this to start it off, to kick it off, because that would have at least given him some cred, right? Right? Now, I will admit I am just joking there, but I mean, there's the point. Don't bitch about somebody being a socialist when the leader of your party is actually meeting with the most absolute authoritarian socialist dictator on the face of the earth and smiling and having pictures with him. I mean, that's kind of a little bit hypocritical, one might say. Now, in today's video, we are going to be talking about the Bernie Sanders part of this and whether he is a socialist or a democratic socialist like he claims to be or not. So that's the focus. But to get an idea to whether Bernie is or not, there are two things that we really need to talk about. We need to talk about what a capitalist is and what a socialist is. Now, I am going to say I'm going to explain these very quickly and extremely skin deep. So I know there's a lot more we can go into, but for the sake of this video, I only want to talk about the absolute basics, because in this situation with Bernie, the basics is all we basically need. So with the idea of capitalism, the whole basic part of it is, private enterprise. And when you create a business or if you do your own work, you actually get the profits from that work. So for example, let's say you are an individual and you want to own your own company producing something. You go ahead and put the money and the capital into it, and then you hire workers and whatnot. And over the course of a year, you make $1 million. Let's say all of your costs, your workers and the equipment and all that, cost around 40%. And let's say you take an extra 20% and put it aside for retooling or maybe making a new factory or something like that. You're talking about a 40% profit. Now, in capitalism, that profit would go to you or the other people in your business, or if you have shareholders, it would go to them. The whole idea is that the person who owns the company or the people involved with the investment of the company or the shareholders of the company are the ones that are actually going to financially benefit from the success of the company. That is just a very, very basic understanding of capitalism, just to get the idea across. Now with socialism, it's different, but it truly isn't like totally different. So if we take that 40%, we're just changing who gets that 40%. So instead of a business owner or shareholders getting that 40% will then go to the workers, essentially. That's the whole idea. You might have heard that the workers control the means of production. Well, they're the ones who are supposed to benefit from the profit of that production. Now, the way in which that profit is distributed and received is a little bit different when you look at socialism through different lenses. So if we look at the concept of Marxist-Leninism, particularly more on that Leninism part, the whole entire thing was based on the fact that the workers were the state and the state were the workers. So therefore, when the profits came from the factory or whatever, it would then be put back into the state, which the state then would redistribute throughout the country, either to the people, which that rarely happened, but it was more likely to reinvest in infrastructure, or more likely invest in the military. So the concept and the idea was that the state and the workers were one and the same, so therefore the state was the one getting all the money. And on top of that, the whole idea behind Leninism is that you had a one-party state that didn't allow for democratic competition. So that was another little kink in it that made it that the absolute control of the amount of profit and capital going through the system went directly to the state and then distributed according to what the state wanted it to go out as. So again, these are very, very, very simple understandings of what capitalism and socialism are, but for our video, it's enough for this purpose. So just remember, capitalism, money goes to the owners or shareholders, whoever. Socialism, the money goes to the workers, which could go to the state and distributed in another way. So where that profit goes is just dependent on the system. Now, one thing that Bernie Sanders always says is that he's a democratic socialist.
Because first we're going to explain what democratic socialism is.
So what does that mean? Like, what does that even mean? And is Bernie actually a democratic socialist? Well, we can look at it in two ways. We can look at it in a macro way and a micro way. So first, let's go ahead and look at it in a macro way. So the idea of democratic socialism in a macro way is that it exists, socialism exists within a democratic society. So that means multiple political parties, pluralism, and whatnot. Now, it still means the workers control the means of production, but then the profits that come from that means of production then do, let's say, go to the state if it represents the people, and then whatever political party gets elected then determines how that money goes out. So it's absolutely different than Marxist-Leninist ideology because of the fact that you don't have a one-party state. So it's absolutely fundamentally opposed to that. It supports the idea of democracy and that the vote of the people will then determine how that money that was profited then goes out to, whatever, the workers, infrastructure, military, or whatever. Now, if we look at the micro level, we actually kind of have this in the United States already. So if you have a co-op in your neighborhood, the place that sells like Tasmanian monkey yogurt or organic shampoo made of bee piss or whatever, you know what I'm talking about. You've been to those places. Those are usually co-ops, cooperatives in which the people there are the ones who benefit from the profits of those. They are the workers that collectively work there, as well as the members that they have as well. They can almost be seen as shareholders, but usually no one has more of a right in it than another person. And these people at the local level collectively decide what to do. And they're the ones that benefit from the profits of their company. Now, at the micro level, it's a little bit different because what will happen then is that the money doesn't necessarily go to the state and the decisions aren't made by the state. Instead, what it is that the decisions are made internally within the co-op or whatever the organization is. So let's say you do, as we mentioned earlier in the video, you have a company that made $1 million. The workers within that company would determine how that $1 million is allocated, will determine if people should be paid more, they should be reinvestment or whatever. The decisions would be done amongst the workers within the organization. They wouldn't be done by some outside government or something like that. So that's at the most micro. So there are differences, but the idea behind democratic socialism is that there is a democratic process to it in which the majority vote or the people's say determines where the benefits come from and where the profits from other people's labor ends up going. So now the big question is Bernie Sanders a democratic socialist? And the answer is no. He's absolutely not one. And the reason why is because he doesn't like the capitalist society. He pretty much dislikes it. as many of us do because it screwed us over and it has created income inequality. But on the other hand, he's never advocated the overthrow of it. He's never talked about the proletariat rising and taking over the means of production. So the socialist aspect of what he says doesn't exist. He is not technically a socialist in the classical sense or in any other sense. He never talks about this taking over the means of production. So for Bernie to say that he's a democratic socialist is fundamentally different than what he really is, which I'll get into in a sec. Another thing too is that conservatives like throwing the word communists and socialists out there and they don't even know what the hell it means. They just are like, oh, it's a buzzword that will get people angry, like, you know, like integration and busing, okay? And honestly, the word socialist, if you look at it back in the day, 50s, 60s, and 70s, very much a code word, very much a code word. So it's no surprise that this is continuing on into the 2000s, and it's just basically the Lee Atwater playbook that we just see playing out today. So what is Bernie? So if he's not a socialist, what is he? Well, he is pretty much a social democrat, right? So this is what Bernie really is. And this is no different than many of those center-left or left-leaning parties that we see in Europe. And the whole idea behind just basic social democracy is that there is a stronger welfare state. So the things such as healthcare, just welfare to help people work, finding jobs, and other things are provided by the state more than they're provided by individual corporations. So therefore, instead of health insurance companies determining how doctors and hospitals and medical providers are paid, the state takes that money in and then they distribute the money. So all it is that it provides a welfare system for the people of that country. And as a matter of fact, every country pretty much has gone through this. And even though, let's say, for example, the Socialist Party in France is a socialist party, and it actually started off as like a real socialist party, it is now morphed into a social democratic party, which is now basically, it's basically nothing nowadays. And again, that's a whole nother video for a whole nother day. So no, Bernie isn't a socialist. Bernie isn't a socialist at all, but that won't stop Republicans from using the word socialist all the time because they think it sounds bad and, you know, they just love doing it because I guess, you know, thinking would be a little bit harder than just calling people names without even knowing what the hell the name means in the first place. All right. Well, thank you very much. If you made it this far, please subscribe to the channel, and I'll be making more videos about this topic, about Bernie Sanders, actually, about democratic socialism, and also some historical videos in the near future. One that's going to be coming up in the near future, the 1972 election. Would George Wallace have won the 1972 election? That video is going to be coming up in the future. Thank you all very much for joining me. Have a wonderful day wherever it is you are, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.